Yeah, it's just us two, just the tech team. All right, we are live streaming and unmuted, so whenever you're ready, we're good to go.
Very good. So we'll go ahead and we will start the Strategic Planning Committee meeting for August 15th, 2023. It's 5:03 p.m. Well, welcome everybody. Tonight, before we get into this, tonight we have, I'll pull the draft strategic plan off of the table so we can have a final vote on that. Tonight, it's actually listed in your agenda as second reading. That's a mistake. It was tabled. I had to have one reading in the first place, but it was tabled back 2 meetings ago. So we'll have a final vote on that this evening. And actually, all of that we'll vote on is what we have here right in front of us. Is that correct? That's all of the objectives?
Yeah, these are the goals and objectives. Obviously, the action items are not in the version that's in front of committee, but we felt like the action items make more sense when you're reviewing them if they're under the goals and objectives. So that's just for our viewing pleasure.
Exactly. So today's meeting and our next step in this iteration is to talk about what do we do with the goals and the action items, if you will. And if you remember the action items in my scenario are the leaves on the tree. We built the tree, we got the limbs, now we got to put leaves on it. And this is the action items, the things that we need to work towards. And you'll remember some time ago, this goes back a couple months now, when we started looking into this stuff, it got very much in-depth very quickly. And there's a lot of questions that revolve around this level of detail, right? Because now we're really digging in to the overall objectives and looking at very specific things. So the question is, for our meeting today to decide is how do we want to proceed from here? How do we take these action items and work them through the vetting process, if you will? How do we want to do that as a group, like we've been doing? Or should we look for an alternative way? One of the alternative ways that we might want to consider is something the mayor has brought up, and I agree with, is do we take this, and I think Jim actually said this too in one of our conversations, was do we take some of these in groups and hand them off to other committees? We have formed a different committee to look at a specific set of objective or action items. So how do we want to proceed? Do we want to take all this on ourselves, or do we start to pare this down and involve some other people to help us through the process as we move forward? Jim?
Go ahead. No, go ahead. Well, I was just going to say, other committees, are you saying committees that are already formed or forming new committees, or which?
Either or.
Both.
Or both.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you could make, let's say Parks and Recs, there's probably a chunk in here that should go to that committee.
Okay.
There may be something else specifically that we want to form a committee for, 2 or 3 people, 4 people max probably, to let them look into some of these things. I think it could go either way or both. Jim?
I was going to say, I'd like to see you folks as a whole here consider raising that question up one more notch, a little higher level. In that we've talked all along that it's the intention for this document to be a living and breathing document, that it evolved with the city. And I don't think it's, from my perspective, giving it due justice or due consideration if you're only doing that once every 5 years or whatever. My thought was, from the beginning of talking to you about strategic planning, that it's clear there are a number of components here that are just absolutely missing in the document in terms of the action items. It's clear there are a lot of items that are absolutely controversial, and it's clear that there are 1 or 2 that everybody likes. That being said, my thought was this committee really should be considering at this point the process, not for just considering these, but how any idea gets introduced to the plan. So we talked about when someone in the community, it happens all the time, comes up to the mayor's office and they say, when Rotary did Rotary Way, that actually looked pretty good. And they got tired of it getting shoddy and they took their sign off it. Now nobody takes care of it. We think managing and caring for Rotary Way is an important thing, and you should do that for a number of the alleys in the community. It behooves you as a council and this committee, I think, to say, does number one, how do you consider that? Because there is no process for that being considered other than it going either to an individual council person who may or may not take it to another level, whoever the mayor is at the time, who may or may not, or the service director or engineer or anybody else that's elected. So the idea is from my perspective, what is your process for any item that could be considered an action item under this plan? How would you vet it and how would you move it on?
So I feel like we already have talked about that. So in the version that's in front of council, what we decided as to keep it moving for this point in time, that it would go to the clerk of council and be disseminated to the strategic planning committee. That's what's currently in the document. I agree that this is a living, breathing document. I think that's the intention of all of us, but we also need to have a starting point of the things that we heard that were important to begin that work and put that into the implementation process. In the document that's currently before council, it also has that this is also an annual review process, right? It's ongoing. But that we will specifically say, hey, council, we're going to be beginning our budgeting process in the next couple of months. Are there specific items that we've heard from the public or that you guys see as initiatives that we should be considering for that? I believe at one point in time, we talked about creating a form or like an application that was kind of standard, like submit your idea to strategic planning. That would then go probably to the strategic planning email that we already have established. Then we could determine, is that something that just strategic planning should be discussing, or is that something that is water and sewer committee or planning and zoning? So I do feel like we already have some of that starting point, but I also think while we can do both of those at the same time, right? Because these are things that we've already kind of heard come up through the process, that we need to determine, okay, are we going to continue to move them forward? Some of these are already in process. So putting them as part of the plan to continue to hold us accountable and show that these are things that align with the significant goals and objectives that we heard come from the public, I think is really important to kind of show that progress, the starting point, and then going through that standard implementation. I think that was a key portion of why we hired Planning X, and I don't think that that's going by the wayside. I think we have a starting point and then we can refine it.
So the mayor let me reiterate that, paraphrase, that is, if something new was coming to the plan or potentially would come to the plan, it would be submitted to clerk of council, then submitted to this committee, whatever this committee looks like at that point in time. And then it would be vetted through here to see number one if it goes through, and then where into the objective tree it would hang, if you would.
Correct.
Placed.
That's how it's currently in the document.
Right.
And then I know at one of the meetings we talked about like creating a form that like says, so that it kind of walks the person through, like which goal or objective do you feel like this, falls with under? If there's not one, what do you see that being? And kind of providing an explanation, kind of make your case, and then it comes to this group for us to kind of start that discussion.
So I guess two comments. One's a question. Does anybody disagree with that thought? Or we all pretty much agree with this way? Because if it is, it's alluded to in the document. It says if you have an idea, take it to the council clerk. But it doesn't say those next steps. So I would ask that this committee formally adopt that process, that it goes community ideas or to go to the council clerk and to be referred by council to the strategic planning committee. And you have then the first step of what you're asking for, Jeff, and that is where we go. And then the next step is answer the question that you asked at the beginning of the meeting. Then where does it go from here? Do we consider each point, or do we determine what committee it goes to, or whatever? So if we all agree that that's the first part, let's formalize the first part now and say we accomplished something. And call it a night.
What's our status with Planning Next? Are they done? Are they still available?
I think they have provided me the packaged documents that we can make minor changes. I haven't specifically asked them if there's any kind of time left on our clock. Because obviously the last couple of times we said like, these are the kind of final changes. But we can certainly revisit that. But I guess my only concern with that is that formalizing it in the document like today, right? If you said, which we can amend on the fly
That's not
at
what I'm
the
proposing.
meeting,
Right,
okay.
no, no. I'm saying this group formulate, this is this group's adopted process.
Oh,
This
yeah,
is
no,
what-
I'm totally on board with that, and I think that doing it that way is much cleaner, so that if we find hiccups in the process, we're able to change it and put it out on our website and say like, here's the process we use, and then we learn and adapt and are able to communicate it rather than it being in a formal adopted document.
The, when Planning Next made their presentation to us as part of the folks who were trying to get the business, one of the things that I specifically remember hearing and found attractive, and I thought others on the committee did, was their post-plan implementation processes, and the fact that they had a host of communities that have done this and actually meet regularly and talk about these things. And I think that they have some expertise that could be utilized in how we incorporate our tracking of our document, of our plans, and that there's some value. They're not actually creating a document, but they're talking about processes that they've seen work. That's the only reason I asked about about what our status with that was. And it would simply, I would imagine if we would want to extend, it would be some kind of just flat rate time thing. And it's not like they would be producing, they could be giving input. But I would also be interested if indeed they do have for lack of a better term, a users group or a citizen or a city's clients group, that we gain access to that and
That's an interesting.
join, attend, review, because the Tennessee example, Manhattan, Kansas, Valparaiso, they've all been here.
Mhm.
I'm all for copying from somebody else. That's my whole career, copying from somebody else. I mean, that's why reinvent the wheel.
Jim, did you have anything else? I'm sorry, Dennis.
No, I was just gonna say, I was gonna mention the same thing. Was it Planning Next that mentioned that they have, I don't know, it's an annual event or every other year where they invite clients of theirs in and share these ideas like he's talking about, like Brandon mentioned? Or am I getting this confused with another group?
Almost sure that's.
I know they did something for their
Somebody-
like 20th anniversary, but I don't know if that's something they do.
They
But I mean,
encourage them regularly with their groups, user groups.
Yeah,
But I think, no, I think it's a good idea if they have something like that, that we ask to be invited or start one ourselves, have Planning Next there, and 3 or 4 of their clients, and throw a lunch or something like that. Exchange ideas, which I think there can be a lot learned from communities that have been through this. And I think this is the first time Finley's been through it, at least in formalized with a consultant like this. So I'd be in favor of it.
and we do have, just going back to the implementation and the process standpoint, they just provide all of the documents that they utilize for their tracking. And if you recall, probably, Valley, I've lost all track of time, 2 or 3 months ago, you know, when the action item level was the thing that they kind of put into that action plan. So they've provided us that spreadsheet and the tracking document and the kind of process information that they utilize to do that follow-up. And then that's what ties back into, you know, the process wheel that is in the document as well. So we do have some of that content for us to fill in, to utilize. But I can definitely reach out to them to see if they have kind of that regular think tank group of their clients.
So back to your original question. I'm just curious, like if you gave bits and pieces or whatever to another committee, whoever that might be, are we gonna see that back at this committee before it?
Oh, yeah.
I think everything.
I think everything would.
I mean, not to think that, that we, but I don't know, like, there might be, and I couldn't tell you exactly what it might be at the moment, that like, I may have a strong opinion on it, because somebody else, when they like decide in their group of 3 or whatever that, oh, no, we don't even want to do that. Let's say my strong opinion was that we really need to do that. I might go, oh, I wish they'd that. I don't, surely I'm not the only one
And
that
then maybe
thinks
that
that.
committee presents it to this committee, or,
Sure.
if there's.
I mean, I
something
just
like
wondered
that.
if that was, I know we're making that plan and you don't necessarily probably have, but I just wondered how that was gonna work.
I'm sorry, Mayor. Go
No,
ahead.
I think you and I were gonna say the same thing. Everything would be in a committee report that all of council would have to adopt.
Yeah, I think ultimately, I guess we could say it would be a committee report of some sort, even if it was an ad hoc committee. Would still be in a report that we would have to then take that into account and adopt it in the plan. I would expect, at least my thought would be, that no matter what, any changes to this document would ultimately come through this committee. And that goes where we're really kind of talking about 2 different things now. So we got to be careful that we keep things at 2 different levels. We've got this set of action items, which are all the stuff that we garnered over the last year from the public. So
And
this
that's
is
what I
the
was talking
original.
about,
set.
not new ones, yeah.
Right. And then we talk about the process for new stuff coming in. Are they somewhat related? Yes, but there's a difference there too. Because once we get through this and we get the initial set in, then we start into the regular process. To me, those are 2 different things. I would hope that we would never have to go back through this again, what we're getting ready to embark on here.
Well, and I can give you an example that I think is pertinent to the conversation. And that would be just as another elected official. If any of you had something that you thought should be incorporated in, and you're not on the strategic planning committee, you should be able to come in here and say the strategic planning committee, I really think we have something here that we should consider incorporating. And I realize it's not specifically what this committee deals with, but we have one other committee that does. And we need this. And I think as long as you guys are comfortable with it, how would you feel about sending it to that other committee for consideration? Because it's not here. Or I would say, hey, here's a financial component that I truly believe should be incorporated into our objectives. And this committee, in some cases, would be able to decide on all their own because you don't have a standing committee. In other cases, something might go to appropriations and then come back, or a committee of the whole. And I wouldn't rule out it going to a committee of the whole for consideration by the whole body.
Sure.
Although that happens ultimately when they vote on it.
Great.
Let's go back. I think you've made just a very good distinction that we need to think about. One of them is, you said there's 2 things are being discussed, and really the one is the implementation of the points that are here.
Yes.
And the second one is the ongoing continual process to keep these goals fresh. You had said we wouldn't look at keeping the goals fresh until we implemented all these things. I would think it would actually happen at the same time, but
Just to clarify, you're referring to action items and not goals.
yeah, action items, and that the process of what I'll say the keeping it fresh process is the process of bringing new ideas in from whatever the source, council reps, citizens, administration, and then you, but the implementation is the vetting and the implementation process is they're separate, and I think we should consider them separately.
Agreed.
I mean, really big wall separating, because, and I think our next thing is really implementation
I guess,
at this time.
yeah, I get your point. I want to define implementation. Implementation in my context is getting them into the plan. Not actually
doing
starting a
Okay,
the first responders to carry Narcan.
okay, and that, in my version, implementation is
Do it.
doing it. It is.
Right, so,
It is, and
That's what I'm
there's a great example, and it's the one where we say, look at how we do waste, trash collection in here. So the implementation of the analysis of that goal and a deep dive and how that might look, I'm calling that an implementation.
So we might want to use a different word.
But
my word is wrong. Is not accurate.
I would agree with that. Not, I'm just saying, because when I hear implementation, I'm thinking what Grant is thinking, and
Yes.
I'm not sure what
I-
yours is, but it's just, there you
Adopt
go.
it.
There you go. That's good.
Because we're talking really about three things. One is how they get in the plan, and we have said it's already headed towards that. That's
Yes.
been done. The second is, okay, now, what do we do with those? Where do they belong, and how do we make sure they're included or not included? How do we vet those? So it's the vetting process, is really what it is. And then the third is the actual implementation of things that were successfully vetted in the plan.
Yes. Implementation, though. So to me, this is an interesting point. Implementation goes with day-to-day business. Right? If we have financial goals that we put in here, Jim, that goes to appropriations in your office. You know, administration picks up the vast majority of it because you're implementing with your people, you're pushing that down into the right departments so that they can implement and come back. So I think it's not incumbent upon this group to push implementation of every action item. Is that, am I off base there? We follow up on it to see if they are, or what the process, or what's happening.
That kind of goes back to your opening statement of how do you attack this thing? And you said, do we do it all ourselves? Do we use committees, existing committees? Do we stand up ad hocs? And so as an example, one of these things talks a lot about utilities and well, we have water and sewer committee. So you could say these goals, these ones, we're going to send those to the water sewer committee for evaluation, monitoring, whatever, and ask the water and sewer committee report semi-annually on them. Then you get something like trash. Where would trash go? So where would the evaluation of the trash collection go? And there is no place. So we stand up an ad hoc committee.
Right.
And have them tackle that, evaluate it, see what other communities are doing, talk with refuge providers, query the citizens, whatever, and attack it and ask them to come back at a specific time. And you're right, some of these are, and we would go through these things and see where, is it an ad hoc, is it under an existing committee, whatever. Is it really just an administration thing? And I think that from using my term, because I haven't heard one that works better, for the implementation, that's a structure that potentially is operational or it could work, and then you ask for reporting, some kind of regular reports. It's not really the strategic committee, planning committee it is, but you get it through a report to council, a committee report to council. And you're doing it in one of, and it's so there's really kind of three groups. There's a standing committee, an ad hoc committee, and the administration. And those committees can bring other people in if they, so desire. I wouldn't touch the trash one without talking to the folks from local trash providers. I'd want their input on it.
So I think, Grant, I really agree and I appreciate that because I really envision, from the administrative side and our department heads, this becomes like right now we have, a document that we work with the department heads to set out their goals for the years. And we do quarterly meetings where we all review them and talk about it and change what the target is. And the action plan document that we would implement all of our action items into, our departments, once we adopt just the goals and objectives, that will help align some of their work, right? Like what are the things that they're doing that already are supporting some of those goals and objectives? So we will reshape that. Then once we get this new document that has the actual action items that you all have adopted, then we would, start utilizing that. Some of the ones that our department heads have might be to the level where they're actually a part of the strategic plan. Some of them are just probably their normal, business.
Right.
But I definitely see this becoming the document where our department heads are utilizing this, updating, they're talking about it in our sync meetings. We're going over it, we're reporting out to your committees. You guys are providing us feedback to help. And part of that document is setting the timeline. Some of these are 10-year projects. These are not, 3-month projects, right? A lot of them are going to have those kind of overarching things. And then there's going to be some low hanging fruit that like, hey, in 2024, we should have this accomplished, or at least this step in this accomplished, the evaluation process. So I definitely think that there's that opportunity where at the beginning of every year, the committees are saying, okay, what are our kind of action items and objective alignments that we need to be working on, along with then those things that we bring up to you guys kind of as the year goes.
So do you see your KPIs being, this KPI talks to this goal
Most likely.
or whatever the high, whatever.
Well, when I was building out like the operational section, right, when we took that step back and said, hey, we really didn't provide any context and accountability around just our normal operations, I started just going kind of department by department and looking at our key performance indicators. What does success look like, right? Water quality and well-maintained roads and responsive, maintenance is key. So I think a lot of them already do tie, and I think we'll just be able to further clarify that in the report that you guys get.
Jim, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think there's a good point there. I do truly think, if not completely, or almost ultimately replace the KPI system, this becomes the reporting mechanism for you guys knowing council's goals are being accomplished, the administration's KPIs that will reflect how they're approaching the day-to-day operations and what they're doing to accomplish the things they need to do this. What I wouldn't want to see happen is I would not want to see, well, I would want to see this body make reporting on the plan annually a standard part of what happens and that it comes out of this committee. The strategic planning committee has approved, adopted in cooperation with the other standing committees and council administration community, these items that we're moving forward. And community, here's where it stands. Here's our annual report. This becomes a non-fiscal annual report. It becomes your community report that reports out annually. It says what you're doing. So those build outs at this level on each item don't have to be incredibly detailed like a book report. All they need to be is with trash. We know that an ad hoc committee is working on trash and they decide not to go into business, but that they're going to regulate what days, what companies are in what section of town so that we can protect the community so they're not hearing trash trucks at 6 o'clock in the morning every day. By approaching it that way, it adapts. And I think what you have to continually take into consideration is you're all individual elected officials. You're going to have committees, for lack of a better word, go rogue. You're going to have committee chairs that, regardless of the goals, may or may not agree personally and may or may not drive in that direction. Great.
This process is not mutually exclusive with the KPIs. KPIs are is implementation at a department level. It's a way to manage the departments. The KPI should tie to this. If you have a KPI that doesn't tie to this, it should tell the administration that you got to question why we have this KPI, but they should work in conjunction. And I do not want a council to get into the micromanagement of how the mayor works with her department heads. That's not the intent. But I think that they tie together. In a similar way, as I've always said, I'm going to go through our agenda and say, what does resolution 016-2023 speak to? It speaks to 1.5 and 5.3. And you could almost, as you're reporting, you could say, okay, what do we do for 1.5? Well, we did these resolutions. They were part of it. And if it doesn't have a, if it doesn't have one, then the council needs to be saying why, or is the plan missing something, or are we missing something by doing that?
I think both make very good points. And it's, you all were speaking, it brought up in my mind is the next step in the delineating the process is what happens once something's done. Using the trash process, I like that. We evaluated it, this is what we came up with. Okay, where does that go for posterity's sake? Does we just take it out of the plan, put a red line through it?
Well, especially
Because,
on that example, don't mean to interrupt your train of thought, but I don't know that I would get rid of that one, because what if in 5 years you got a whole bunch of people complaining that whatever you came up with doesn't work?
And I think, so that's a great point, Beth. So how do we handle that? But, we evaluated it today, and let's just say we said no. So where does that go? Does that go, at the end of the plan?
No, we said no, that'd be fine.
Well, but the point is, does it go to the back of the plan and say, not implemented because X, Y, Z?
No, you just,
Or the next column, I'm sorry, go ahead.
decided not to,
Right.
proceed with it. And the memorialization of that is, in that example, you stood up an ad hoc committee, and that committee, in essence, produces a report or something that memorializes their decision and the reasons behind it.
Right.
I actually just saw it in something on the Cleveland strategic plan about how to, but they had 4 options for something. And they simply, in their report, they said, options A and D were considered no-goes and they had specific reasons behind it. And they're still presented, it's still in the presentation, but it's done. And then at some point in time, when you redo the plan and do the numbers and stuff, they fall off and it becomes, that was the 2023 version of the plan. Now we're on the 2025 version of the plan.
Right. So I think it's right. So that's kind of where I was going to grant was they fall off, the leaf falls off.
Yeah.
It either falls into the completed bucket or the fire heap, and they both end up in the back of the document as one or the other, but then it comes off the plan. And then new stuff finds its way on. And then that's how the life cycle of an idea.
But that
is
is
strategic plan.
maintained somewhere.
Yeah, we will definitely, that's what I was
That's
gonna
all.
say, is there will definitely, Jacqueline and I,
that tomorrow morning.
Jacqueline and I, we have records retention, obviously, but there will definitely be a level of accountability with those reports that we then have kind of that look back folder, right? On like,
Okay.
here was the one that was evaluated related to trash hauling, and here were the documents utilized to
It's like what Beth
evaluate.
said, 5 years from now.
Exactly. You might want
Hey,
to.
show us what you guys did 5 years ago.
Right.
Geez, where's that at?
It's like a
That's why
webpage 5
you're-
years ago.
you keep
What
it
was the
somewhere.
webpage 5 years ago?
Yeah.
Well, that'll automatically archive, so we can.
So Jeff, that being said, if we do this right, if the process is correct, 5 years from now, you're really looking at the very high level goals and directions of the community, not necessarily the subsets underneath, because it has evolved very smoothly over that 5 year period. There's some have come on, some have come off, some have been completed, some have not. And it's constantly changing as you want. So your 5 year is the greater look at the document, which is really what should have happened if you did the process right. You're not going back to have the whole task thing all over again.
So the point, I guess, Jim, your point being is 5 years, we take a look at the branches.
You have branches in the
And
trunk.
on a yearly basis, we take a look at the leaves.
I would say on a monthly basis. I mean, it's
Or,
going to
I mean,
evolve with your
ongoing,
meetings.
yeah.
Yeah, ongoing. I mean, that's standard part of your committee structure. Somebody comes in, yeah.
Sorry.
Well, and some of them I just think are always gonna be on there. Based on the way they
Yes.
word it, like maintain or whatever.
Right.
I don't have one right in front of me that I can think of, but let's just say you were talking about, I don't know, guaranteeing lack of absenteeism or whatever, and then you hit a year like COVID, where people are actually planned to be out of the office. That's probably a bad example, but you know what I'm saying.
Yes.
That, something can come up out of the blue, or, the Maui Fire Department or whatever. And I'm not saying that they could have done that better, but I think some things just happen and it's like, oh, gee, that would have been good if we had, you know what I mean? So if you're maintaining something like that, there's things that could come in every year that would be, oh, hey, this is a new thing, this life evolves, but
No doubt about it.
I think Beth hits on one of the most important points that we've omitted in this, and that is contingency planning. This does not address contingency planning for the city, basically one iota.
that's a disaster plan on 111C.
There's more to contingency planning than a disaster plan. Contingency planning is your finances, it's your operations.
Yeah, but we're talking about the implementation of this, and is it,
I didn't
Hang
interrupt
on,
you, so
great.
please.
Hang on.
So what I'm saying is, as this evolves and those things come up, I would see those components, again, being naturally added in here, and then you become, then you get to the point where you have to say, should this be a branch? You know, because it's not just about the derecho coming through. It's about the other components.
So you're talking about down the road.
As it grows, so yeah, it should
Yes.
accommodate that, because it's not here.
Grant?
I'm not here to boil the ocean, I'm here to work out the implementation.
Right, and again, two different things. Ongoing process versus what's in front of us. Our job that we've got to get through this. What do we do? How do we get these?
So,
put in?
Have you heard enough that we could call
So-
them for a day and then come back at the next one with a more of a, like, a write-up of what we think we heard?
So,
well, you've got something written down, I was gonna say, do you need a motion for regarding the original process that we talked about for getting ideas in?
so yes to all of you. Let me say this.
Can I ask one more question? before you stage
Absolutely,
or
before
whatever?
I say that, yes.
What's your thought
On,
on your original question? Do you like it being done here or in different committees or?
for the current set that we're.
Yep, the
have
little
in front
dots
of
that
us,
are there that we're
No,
talking
I
about.
think we need to disseminate this, and I think so I'll go back and I'll answer the question, because you led right into it, Beth. My opinion. I still think, we've had a great discussion here. This really, quite honestly, is one of the better discussions we've had in quite some time. I certainly appreciate everybody's input, because now we're getting down to the nitty-gritty, the stuff that's really gonna count when we're not here anymore. And those are the important parts. And I will come up with a motion on that in a minute, on what we want to leave here with. But I do believe that what we should do next is everybody should take this home and go through it and figure out in your mind, where should this go? Is it by a group? Is it individually? And get your thoughts. Should it go to a specific already standing committee? Or in your mind, is that an ad hoc that needs to be stood up?
Dot by dot.
For the most part. And it could be, who knows? But I'm not going to put any limitations on it, because I think everybody's going to look at this a little bit differently. But I also believe we're all going to come within probably 5 or 6 buckets. Everybody's going to fall in and have something that falls into those zones or into those buckets. And that would be our next meeting. It's kind of what I thought we were going to do today, but quite honestly, the conversation we had today, I think was more important. Is everybody agreeable with that?
You want to do it at the goal level or at the objective level, or the next one down, whatever that
Action item?
is, at the action item?
Action items. We've done goals. Goals are approved, right?
They hopefully will be this evening.
There will be tonight. So goals, let me, when we're looking at this, Mayor, make sure I'm looking.
So the goals are the 1, 2, 3 through 7. The objectives are the 1.1, 1.2. The action items are the 1.1A through 1.1F. So in some instances, I think you're looking at the action item level. However, in some instances, you may say all of the action items under that objective should go to a committee. When you go through it, you may say this goal should just be assigned to a committee. I think that's what you just need to read through and review and determine.
Can you go back through that again?
1.1 is the objectives, is that so that we're on the same page? That's the
Correct. It's
objective.
goal, objective,
And then
action.
action items, okay.
I'm not the only
The
one.
ones with the little letter after them, are the ones that we're trying to decide.
And per my suggestions in the past, if you haven't listened to the ethics training online, it's like 2 hours to do it. Because it's going to benefit you immeasurably, because there are certain action items depending on your involvement in the community, personally, with other groups, other companies, anything. There are certain, even the conversation is inappropriate from an ethics point of view, and it's going to be recorded. So my my suggestion is.
So your point there, Jim, is that there are
Please
some
take
things you need to recuse yourself from conversation
Absolutely.
when it gets to the action items.
If we're going to go down that path here, everybody probably will have at least one action item. we have to review, so
Yeah,
probably
I
not
think it's
one.
a point we'll take. And we're all involved in stuff and we need to back off from whatever so that we don't unduly influence things.
So the goals are 1, 2, 3, 4 through 7.
Yep.
Objectives are the 1.1, 1.2, 1.3.
Yep.
And then the action items are the ones that have a letter behind it.
Correct.
Terminology is accepted. Thank you.
It only took me 2 months to figure that out. I still get it wrong, so don't sue.
So Jeff, if I could make a motion, based on the beginning of the meeting, that components, tasks, action items, let's call them action items for the sake of the motion, that are to be added or adopted on the plan, be vetted through the council clerk and sent to the strategic planning committee for review and determination as to how it will be disposed of, similar to what is being done with the original set of action items.
Now, and Jim, you were talking about ongoing basis.
Ongoing basis, starting today. As we do this, once you guys adopt that, somebody could come up with an idea tomorrow.
Great.
Yeah.
So, but this current set.
I'm not touching that at all. I'm
Great,
just
thank
saying that they'll be handled in a similar or same manner.
Well, I was just gonna recommend that maybe we simplify that motion.
Can you
And
take about 30 words out of it?
I was just gonna say, prepare a process outline for adoption at the next meeting. And I think we can bring the
Okay.
document of what was just discussed, as well as a template of what the form would look like on for us to discuss at the committee. So we can just put together a nice little process.
Second the mayor's motion.
Discussion, I'm sorry. Right.
No, that sounds good.
Well,
No, I
That's
like
essentially
that,
what
because I
we
like
like. So why is
formalize
that
that too,
document?
That's what we're gonna
versus
have.
me trying to write this
Yeah.
down.
Be nice to see it.
Correct.
In front of them.
Good, right, good.
Good, okay, so moved and seconded that we will prepare a process outline to be discussed at the next meeting. And just for our edification, that process outline is ongoing. And, well, we don't have to talk about current, this is just about ongoing, correct, Jim? That's where you're at, Mayor.
Yes.
Come to the
Move
clerk,
forward
clerk will
items.
refer to a committee at the meeting, and this committee will deal with it at a regular business meeting.
Okay,
I think you should, personally, I think you should do both of them, but
well,
one doesn't happen without the other. I think we've got time to put at least a draft on paper,
for
both,
this set
for both
also,
tasks,
okay,
both the implementation and the ongoing.
okay. That's fine. Yeah, we can do
They're
that.
the same, yeah, it's ultimately,
They're- they are the
it's
same.
a continuation, as we start with the idea, how does the idea flow through to ultimately be disposed of off the document? It's just one process. So
Is there gonna be
there's no
anything
issue.
in that motion that we're gonna decide at the next meeting, who's doing which docs? Are we,
Yes,
because
we're
that
still
is
doing
more of
that.
what we
Talk
talked
about
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
I mean,
Continue discussion on the current action items
We haven't gotten there yet.
would be the second motion.
Who's doing what?
all right, so prepare a process outline for the next meeting for both current and ongoing action items. That's a motion from the mayor,
Sure.
seconded by Grant. Any further discussion? All those who approve, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay.
Thank you.
Oh, yes, I
appreciate
always
you
want to say same
using
sign.
it.
I might do nay. Motion passes, so that will be one.
Motion
The,
to adjourn.
Continue discussion on.
yeah, so the second motion is we'll just continue our discussion. And I'm just gonna put that in.
Yep, just continue discussion.
Very good. Any other further discussion? Do your homework. I'll see you here in 3 weeks, I believe.
Yes,
So.
I will send you a reminder because we don't have another meeting for city
Okay.
council until the 1st of September,
All right.
which as a reminder, no, that's